welcome to this episode 243 of Frame and Reference. You're about to drop into a conversation between me, Kenny McMillan, and my guest, Rutkowski, ASC, DP of the Audacity. Enjoy.
It is a satire. And of course, our showrunner came from Succession, and these are very dialogue-driven shows with witty, fast-paced dialogue, almost like rapid-fire dialogue. And it questions about visual style. And there was a first block shot by Paula Hudobro with a director, Lucy Forbes, and they had a point of view within that first block. And it quite often involved being very in movement with the actor, moving to and fro with doing a pan over to see something if it was attached to the actor. As we came to episode 3, and Dan Sackheim and I started our block, and Dan had a Glatzer in the past, so he had a language to approach it from. Plus, Dan has a very good mind for this sort of pace. Like Dan, as a human, has a fast pace. And within that, he was able to, I think, expand on the range we were working in without it stepping outside the show. And that was very important. We all wanted the show to feel consistent, but also supporting dialogue and supporting the script page to the utmost. And we basically affected a kind of naturalism that still allowed for heightened dramatic moments, to peak heightened dramatic moments and to realize, oh, wow, I can't believe the characters have gotten here. That's insane. Or even the sort of sotto voce of dialogue, which is so funny, but it goes by in an instant because you've got so much in a run and so good. So Billy, Zach, Sarah, Tom Ruffridge played by Rob, any of them could do a genius rendering of a quick undertone line. And we just knew visually, you have to hear it, see it, feel it. It has to be viable. It has to have context and it has to advance story while at the same time seeming like, oh, just another thing said in rapid fire. But it's too clever a script for you to do that. You have to emphasize and reach those dramatic heights. And I especially am fond of the finale. I'm fond of all the episodes I shot, but I'm especially fond of the finale for what it's able to bring to the overall arc of the story without seeming too forced, without seeming like, oh, we really punched this up. It felt like, no, we're still traveling with these characters and they've just reached increasingly high levels of both importance in their lives, what's going wrong for them, what's not happening that they've been striving for. We've seen it for 7 episodes, but also how they're dealing with it and how fragile it all becomes, how fragile their very consistently heightened egos deal with things. And I thought that was a great way to ground a kind of satire with rapid comedy. Sometimes I'd say to myself, is this like Leo McCarey comedy in the 30s or 40s, where the dialogue is so fast, you almost have to rewatch everything that's said. And that's a testament to the screenwriters and also the directors.
Yeah. As I was watching it, I was getting kind of a photographic feel from it. I don't know if Stephen Shore is the right thing off the top of my head, but it felt very, it was Stephen Shore. All right, go ahead.
Oh, you nailed it, because there's a body of work called American Prospects, and the enthusiasm for the ever-increasing wealth and status of the American consumer is belied by the image in many ways. It's sophisticated that you brought that up, and it's also sophisticated that the work was created along those lines. I definitely brought a lot of still photography to the table. Paula's lookbook with Lucy had shows, had episodic shows and also films, and they were very good references. Dan Sackheim himself is a talented photographer. So when I want to bring something to Dan, sometimes a photography reference is the right one. And it can be from almost any period. I mean, we're talking going back to the 1900s or up to 7 weeks ago. We were very focused on the idea that this story is so current that you could see an image in the news while we were making it, and it might bring up Alibaba, or it might bring up AI, big AI news that was changing the economy. And we would be just a few weeks ahead of it with a script. So you were having these images from the Silicon Valley world come into your prep. And a lot of them were stills, and a lot of them, to me, mattered. It was like, this is the reality. We're making a satirical and very, very humorous version of this. But how far off are we really when we think about the sets we're building, the way we're doing them, the way we're crossing over sets in Vancouver with actual Silicon Valley? In fact, one of the real verisimilitude moments was during the making of the finale, and then we went down to Silicon Valley to film scenes that would intercut throughout the whole season. We stayed in a hotel right in Palo Alto that had a beautiful restaurant, a Nobu Japanese restaurant. And one of the guests on our last night there was Tim Cook. He showed up with SUVs, much like Bardoff does in our story, with security guards. And he sat over at another table while we were having a sort of final meal at this Palo Alto Nobu. And I was like, wow, that is like life imitating art, like directly. So.
Yeah, I grew up in the Bay Area, and it has been very interesting to see how since 1990 till now, just how aggressively the tech industry has changed that town in a way that I'm not a genius, but I can't think of another city that like has been so drastically. I mean, it's not even just the Bay Area, it's the whole world, but specifically, when you're close to them, it's a very strange ecosystem and orbit that they've created around themselves.
Yes, and it creates a great thing to write about and make a show about. When we were in Palo Alto and we'd be driving to location or on our scouts, we'd see those buses, the buses that Google and Meta gets to be able to bring their young engineers all the way from San Francisco, where they prefer to live, down the coast in like business classy looking seats inside the buses that are driven by Teamsters, by the way, interesting note. And they have super Wi-Fi on the buses so they can work the whole drive down and the whole drive back. I think there's a lot of that culture that bears examination, and the show does a great job. More to come. We're starting season 2 in just a couple months, and I'm thinking that even more and better is coming, especially now that we've learned that so much of the military work being done in the Middle East is connected to AI and connected to serious number crunching by computers across the world. It's potent to work on material like that and understand that it's about something real. It's also potent to work with these actors who are really good. I mean, I think many people have asked me, well, what was your major help? What was your major assist in terms of how you did the work on the show? It was the performers, and they lead you on a trail that delivers visually in a way that I'm very happy about.
Yeah, you do have like 12 storylines? It's kind of a big big show.
12, not 12, but if you add in what's happening with the kids of the engineers / entrepreneurs, it gets to be a complex web, and that was very much by design. And I think the finale really attests to how complex it gets and how you have to keep your eye on the ever-evolving beats of individual characters' moments to understand where the tragedy and ultimately the very dark humor lies in the writing.
Yeah. What were some of because coming off of the back of like Masters of the Air and Sugar and stuff, some of those shots could get pretty complicated. This is one moment. This is a pretty more straightforward, people talking to each other type show. Were there any unique challenges coming off, doing something big and then going to something a little more contained that you weren't expecting?
I would love to give you an answer that admits like, oh, scale matters to me. Scale doesn't matter to me that much. Like, I just want the quality of the work to reflect the quality of the writing and the acting. I don't need an enormous canvas or hundreds of people in a frame to tell a story that connects. I just need good writing, good performances, a technical crew that can work with me and keep up with the pace. The biggest challenge, often the biggest challenge, was dealing with the locations that we had in Vancouver, knowing that the whole show had to appear to have been shot in Silicon Valley. So, Palo Alto and its environs. And when you know what those look like, which fortunately I did, and then we went down and did a pre-scout before shooting there, you really can feel the differences, and you start to become a critique of locations. You're like, this location is only good in this much of the circle of view, and then over here we cannot do this. And you also become a critique of daylight, because you want the daylight to feel Californian. You want the colors of the sky to feel Californian. So that was a challenge. The sets were incredibly well done, but to light them and give that California feel is its own challenge. And there's a certain type of California interior, the heat of the light outside, the brightness of the light outside, and then also how it falls off in a lower ceiling craftsman house, or how it affects an office space. And you ask yourself, am I really staying true to what the location is supposed to be? I think another challenge was in the final episode, we had multiple timelines that coexist. So we had multiple story points happening in a coexistent timeline, and you didn't want any confusion for the audience. You needed to have the audience understand this is coexisting with that. And then the child Orson on stage is coexisting with his mother having left right at the moment when it's his moment. That's a big story point, but it's not expositionally stated. It's a visual statement. Like, where's the mom? He's been practicing. She brought him to this school to be her child again, and they hadn't lived together for a while. This is important that we see that he's been left out. And I think equally important is in episode 3, we had to sell the wildfires. Now, this is for several reasons,
Right.
but I think a lot of people who live in California and went through the Palisades and Altadena fires, and before that, the Station Fire, and before that, the Malibu fires, knows what happens when fire and ash and that, desaturation of daylight happens to you. You feel like you're in some other place. It feels like an alien world. We really wanted to punch that and to say, this is what happens when wildfires are destroying hundreds and thousands of acres near enough to where it affects you. And actually, I had been around in San Francisco when Napa fires were happening, and it had this huge effect in San Francisco, sometimes eerily beautiful, but mostly like, holy cow, we are nature's supplicants. We think we control the world. We control large parts of the world we're paying attention to, but we are nature's supplicants. And I think that's one of the underpinnings of the show that's smart. Like, nature rules, and you only think you rule because you have some amazing algorithm or web tracking device.
Yeah. Yeah. The Napa fire specifically, it was exactly like the Blade Runner scene where Kay is walking through the, but yeah, down here was a different type of light. And I will say, I was definitely pulling out the color meter. Like, what is this? Oh, interesting, because it was, hopefully the chances of me seeing that type of atmospheric nonsense is low, but it is a fascinating way that the sun, I've never seen anything like that.
I'm so tempted to show you a panorama I took in Altadena the day after the fires. I happened to be in California for a friend's birthday. It's a big birthday, and she planned it out in, 29 Palms. And we arrived through the smoke to land, only to then learn that my wife's family were being evacuated from Pasadena. And they were very close to the fires. And then we went up the next morning, and I've never seen anything like it. Never seen anything like it. It was absolute destruction zone, but the color in the sky was so unique. So we had a challenge to create that on otherwise beautiful days in Vancouver. And we went about it as you would by changing lighting, changing LUT, changing, even re-rating the camera, and then adding color filters and sometimes grads selectively and all always act tastefully to create this impression that it's just getting worse and that the characters caught up in their own world are ignoring this impactful thing happening to them. And so I think it was ultimately successful, certainly by the end of the episode.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because I kind of, specifically the filters, because I kind of enjoyed seeing just a regular grad employed. I was like, yeah, that's good. I like that instead of, whatever you do in Resolve to try to like orange it up and, in a weird way.
I didn't want to burden the post with creating the entire thing, certainly. I wanted to have a very firsthand effect on it. I also didn't want them to be able to turn away from some of the things I chose and water it down too much. I thought that this is a really bold statement in the script. By the end, you want to see that the world is on fire. And that's why that last dialogue scene in the restaurant with Bardoff and Duncan has an otherworldly feel to the light coming in from outside. I mean, we used gel on the windows so that it would only be the exterior light affected, and then the interior light would be normal tungsten sources or sources you'd have in a restaurant, but that the air would feel acrid, that we used these diffusion filters that had an effect that really felt right. It felt like an acrid, very toxic environment, so that you could sell this idea, oh, everybody's home but these two guys.
During some previous fires, not the big ones, in this exact room, my roommate at the time was sitting there, and I took a photo of him because it was that orange sky thing, but I think it might have been the evening or whatever, and the photo turned out green because it was like a cell phone photo, and I was just so fascinated by how I expected this kind of almost beautiful orange glow, and then it's funny you say acrid because that's how it looked photographically, and I was like, that's fascinating. But it's you're so right. The interior when it's all smoky and stuff is just ugh.
I'm going to try and find this one photo. It's maybe you can or cannot use this part, or I'll send it to you. But I'm going to show you this one photo where you see in a panorama exactly how truly diverse the light is on that morning right after the fires. Because in the direction of the sunrise, totally different. Direction of the sunrise is completely like siennaed and all very opaque. In the direction of the shore, looking west from Altadena, it was like, no, it doesn't look like that. So hold on.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
So that's a panorama taken right near Alta Park in Altadena up Lincoln Drive. And we were checking on a home we owned there, which thankfully was not burned. It was fine.
So I guess you must have planned out throughout like episodes, like where, because we returned to a handful of locations. Were you just setting up like lights? There it is. Or were you tracking time of day for a lot of these? Because you don't really see to the outside. It's just sun coming in.
No, I was often asking myself, what's the continuity? I was rarely placing a lamp except on stage, and even then we had alternates. So you'd have a lamp hung in a position that was favorable to the stage windows or the stage exterior. But I would often mix it up and say, no, this is morning. Maybe we do something from the floor now. Or I would say, no, this is evening. So why don't we have an elimination of direct light, like get rid of the direct light in the windows, put softer lights outside the windows and bring them in so that you feel like daylight's ebbing. And no, I often am concerned with time of day and how to represent it best. I was also concerned with flattering the faces of the performer. So you often gauge like in what angle is going to be working out best. And, performers, you got to take care of their eye sockets, their nose, their mouth. You want something favorable that still reads as a context that is believable to the storyline at that moment.
Yeah. Well, and they're billionaires, right? So they're probably going to look pretty.
The school could be tricky for that.
Oh, yeah.
The school can be tricky. You've got overhead fluorescence, not always favorable. and you're going into these different classroom hallway environments. And then sometimes when characters came to the showcase, the whole storyline of the two teenagers exchanging messages through something they're doing in the school showcase, I was like, okay, they're always going to come downstage to a very, very darkened environment. I need to help them out. The overhead fluorescent, while a useful and accurate depiction of light in a school, isn't often flattering to faces. And the kids, yeah, their faces took light very well. The adults I had to be a little more careful with. And so we augmented close-ups, medium shots, group shots of the adults. And that was very much my goal, was to keep faces flattered but believable within an environment. The show is at core realistic. It has a realism visually, even though the drama is so heightened. So you have to take care of the realism vibe while hopefully giving people something nice to look at in terms of their characters.
Yeah. Was there a kind of rules of operation between you and whoever shot the other episodes, and so that there was kind of a cohesion there? Yeah.
Yeah, we tried to keep things handheld and not do very affected stylistic shots, trying not to do big, long dollies or big crane arm moves. We're trying to stay in a handheld vibe. Even if the camera wasn't necessarily on a shoulder, it would still feel like it. And we were also trying to stay close to the actor rather than at a distance on a telephoto lens, trying not to zoom in and be far away unless it was a needed point of view or some version of a stylistic point. We wanted to travel with the performer. And I think in the finale, there's a long sequence of a war game concocted by Zach Galifianakis' character Bardoff, and he wants to have very realistic war games. And he does a World War I trench battle, but with like all the stuff only a billionaire could afford, the explosions and the smoke and everybody in costume and enemies coming at you. And we knew then that there was a stylistic quotient to selling that, but at core, it's about Tom Ruffage and his PTSD. At core, you're delivering the information that this is cruel to do this to a person who has true PTSD from the first Gulf War, should probably never be asked to put on a uniform or hold a gun again. But there they are doing it, and it's part of that ego thing of like, well, because I do it, it's so cool. And of course, I love Ruffage for being a soldier. I'll put him in an outfit and he'll go into a trench battle. We wanted it to feel aggressively realistic at that moment to help us land Tom Ruffage's reaction to it. So these are the kinds of rules we had about sticking with a character's perspective during a scene.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of what's his name? The guy who played Kirk, Captain Kirk.
William Shatner?
Yeah, when Shatner came back from space and he was all emotional, and then here comes Bezos with like champagne, and he completely ignores what he's talking about, and he's Shatner's having like a real existential moment. He's like, "Here, have I know you're sober, have some champagne." It's like just the complete disconnect between people.
Right, and a good reference: Silicon Valley billionaire, multi-billionaire, talking to a creative, a person with a soul, and not getting why they aren't immediately embracing what they have to say.
Yeah. Did going fully, trying to evoke that handheld look and shooting on a more normal lens, did that help with like the speed of everything, or were you still? Because I'm always interested now in like how people are able to move quickly and still evoke a really pretty look. Because the show is just like generally quite painterly and gorgeous.
Right. Speed of things is a funny concept. I sometimes find a scene of just two people talking in a room to be more challenging than conceiving and executing a big action sequence. While there's more on your list for a big action sequence, the shots themselves tend to have something in them that makes the audience, oh yeah, now this, now that. Whereas the two of us talking in a room, or two characters talking in a room with all the undertones from the scripts before and the script they're in and what's going to happen later, often demands more of you conceptually and then argumentatively, lighting-wise, because you're trying to resolve something very simple into feeling like, oh, an audience should watch this. Two people talking in a room, an audience should keep watching. A lot of that belongs to the script, but I feel an obligation as well creatively to bring something nuanced to that moment. And sometimes I find that harder. The speed of things, I know from minute one to the final minute of every shooting day that the pace of the production is being monitored. It's like going to a gym and you're going to do your normal workout on all the machines you've always worked out on, but someone's literally going to be stopwatching you as you get on and off the rowing machine, on and off the bench press. And it becomes second nature to just want everything to move as quickly as possible. You design that in the prep. You talk about it with your lighting and grip team, with your camera team. What's going to be the most flexible way to move what I call nimble throughout the day? And you design for that. So you may add a third camera for certain sequences, or you may bring in a grip tricks cart that can move you along with an actor well. You'll do something that helps you with that pace. In the end, I like to work at a fast pace, and I've been, I think justifiably rewarded for keeping directors on track with their expected schedule. What I don't like to do is weirdly think about the time as a creative element. It's literally just what you're supposed to do. So it isn't, to me, so creative an element as it is a necessity, and then I'm bringing a creative element into that mix. I hope that answered the question somewhat.
Yeah, no, actually, that's a good way to look at it, because like I was saying before, like shooting docs, the thing I've said a lot is like they'll tell you have an hour to light something, and then the guy shows up 30 minutes early, and they're just like, go now. So I'm always like, what are you guys doing that's making you faster? Because I might need them. I'm always trying to mind little tricks.
Right. One of the things I find with shooting close to the actors, and we shot a lot of times close to the actors, is you put white on the floor or on the back of a couch. You put white fabrics around so that you're taking the lighting you've already established and you're bringing it a little more into the face, or reflecting upon it. Simultaneously, there might be times where you put solids on walls, just literally taping solid black fabric onto a wall, or arranging it in the room in a way that's artfully shaping the light. So I do equal amounts sometimes of removing light as adding light. You also, I believe, need to think about the blocking with the director immediately in terms of how efficient the lighting could be. So if a light I put here, which can give a nice edge or shape to an actor, also can play as a key side when I go over that side of the room, that's the kind of thought process I'm going through even while the rehearsal's happening. And I usually do these diagrams. I'll take the back of the sides and I'll draw where everybody's going in the room or expected to go in the room, where they might sit down or stand up. And I'll start to rationalize in my head, okay, 2 sources here, maybe a little bit of negative fill, maybe a little bit of positive fill. Maybe I bounce one light off the floor. When they get near the window, you'll feel that up bounce. And that usually, it's not always easy, but usually that simplicity of the conception works.
Yeah. A big one for me recently is just conceptualizing, instead of trying to think of how many sources, just thinking, all right, I'm going to make this in my head all one source. And so it can't jump around, like it's only coming from, I'm now in my work just going like, okay, it's always the sun conceptually, and then if other things, they might as well be lamp or bounce, but I found that's been nice for me.
No. And do you ever work with Chinese lanterns?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Round,
those are the budget savers.
Paper shade. I work with them a lot. One of the things that's helpful with them, aside from the naturalism of how they look, and you can nowadays change to LED bulbs so you can vary the Kelvin of them, is that should they get caught in someone's eyeball or eyeglasses, they look quite natural. They're just a round source, which I think stands out as far more environmental than when you use a gridded source or like a vortex or sky panel, which are great lights and very flexible and very quick to work with. But if they show up in eyeglasses or eyeballs, they tend to be a tell, or even the tubes, the Astera tubes. I try to work with Astera tubes nowadays mainly as either back or bounce rather than direct on the face.
Yeah, that's that. I always applaud Yedlin for going to all the trouble to make like fake tape windows and stuff to reflect in people's glasses. And I know he told me on the new Knives Out that like at one point a character is next to a fireplace, and I was like, "Did you CGI the fire in his eye?" And he goes, "No. We had like a $20 TV that we just played the image of a fire and just put it."
That's wonderful.
Right?
Yeah, Steve Yedlin does beautiful work. I've tracked him for years now.
Yeah. Are there other, contemporaries, your ASC sort of neighborhood that you, I guess, steal from? Anyone that you look at and you're like, I should be doing more of that.
It's funny. In thinking about cinematic lighting, I'm always reminded of the phrase, perfection is not the absence of anything more to add. It's the absence of anything more to take away. You've taken away every possible idea and gotten to the simplest ones. And that can be number of units, but it can also be the number of effects that you want to have on a set wall, furniture, the human face, a still life. And I come back again and again to thinking of the simplest versions of setups I've seen on screen. Derek Wolski was an early inspiration and still is. Nobody can overstate how much Gordon Willis meant to everyone, and I can't overstate to people who ask me about my favorite films how much being there mattered to me, seeing the movie Being There, which was shot by Caleb Deschanel. But it was very much a continuation of a style I truly believe observed with Gordon Willis. And then, the work of Edward Hopper, the paintings of Edward Hopper, which my mentor and very good friend Ed Lockman speaks about a lot. Those films those paintings translated to film have a very powerful impact. And I think because there's a cinematic nature in those paintings to begin with, and it's a great education in lighting and also framing, the way he lets certain things go out of the frame or half cuts, windows or things like that. And I think that's super duper important. Robbie Mueller, who was also influenced by Hopper, is a go-to person for me lighting-wise, because Robbie's lighting, when it hits in its best way, it's some of the most beautiful cinematic work. But what people don't notice is when it doesn't hit, when it's just natural and feels good and feels right. And that's also a real technique. That's a thing to let your lighting disappear. And yet if a person were to go back and step through the movie, they realized he was building that world throughout. There's so many people. It would be shameful for me to start mentioning them all because I would inevitably leave someone out. But there've been great people doing great work. I really applaud Matty Libatique, who changed the way we look at certain genres. Matty got thrown a lot of genres. I was fortunate to work with him on Requiem for a Dream as his operator. And then I wound up doing some work on some of the other films, just little bits by comparison. But the Requiem for a Dream progression of saturation, how he handled the negative and diffusion filters was genius. And of course, it's affected me ever since to have been front and center for that. And I shot those little quick cut bits that keeps, staccato entering the movie. And I was very happy that those entered Matty's, film and were part of the visual language. I was influenced by Peter Bijou also, the cinematographer Peter Bijou. Even though I don't do work that looks especially like Peter Bijou, I really enjoyed working with him as an operator. So I think your question is what motivates me now. Sometimes what motivates me right now isn't necessarily a big film like Frankenstein or something like that. It's smaller movies and often from overseas. And when I see them, I get incredibly excited again about, the visual and how it can be handled. I remember Dan Landon did a film called under the skin. And I thought that was just so cool. It was just so beautiful. There's a lot. There's quite a few. Moonlight, many. And Jomo Frey's work on, the Nickel Boys.
Nickel Boys. Yeah.
Outstanding. Totally outstanding. And hard to put your finger necessarily on what it was about his lighting that bridged so beautifully something very stylized and also something very simple. So I applaud that as well.
Yeah. I was able to talk to him when that came out, and that was one of the few films where I was like, that going first person has been tried many times. This is the first time I think it's been like done perfectly.
Remember Lady
no
in
one
the
is
Lake?
kidding. What's that?
Remember the film Lady in the Lake?
Yeah. Oh,
That
yeah.
was on first person in black and white.
Yeah. I guess I haven't seen it. I know of it.
Yeah.
When shooting this show, there's obviously a lot of the main focus is how tech billionaires can basically ruin their own lives. But obviously, like you were saying, a lot of AI discussion and stuff like that. Was that ever talked about between, you guys, the writers, directors, whoever's, the idea of AI coming for filmmaking? You're interfacing directly with that idea. Did you ever talk about it amongst yourselves?
No. I think I've thought about it the same way that there's been a conversation now up to 3 years about, are our jobs going to be replaced by machines? Every time I think about it, I'm like, there's no way. Maybe I'm playing Gaussian about this. Actors want to act in front of real cameras, run and managed by real people. They want that feedback. And there is a feedback through the lens to the operator or to the cinematographer. It feeds back to the set. And there's an energy that I don't believe Claude or, Domocron or robot cameraman is never going to give the actor back what they need from the stage floor. I believe directors as well don't get into this business to go to workstations and collaborate on an AI rendering. I'm sure someone will eventually make a beautiful and interesting and thoughtful and artistic AI project. And Hollywood will say, well, then we're going to save all this money. And then they'll realize, no, that was because that person had a gift and worked in it, probably an expensive experiment to show that it could even happen. We went through the 3D thing 20 years ago, and it's been shown again and again. No, you don't have to make a film in 3D to have a creative impact on the viewer and their thoughts and their belief in a story. You need a story. So to long answer your question, it didn't come up, and I didn't really much think about it. I thought about what I was doing in the way I've learned to do it with people I understand as fellow creatives, collaborators on this kind of work. And when it hits, it hits. You feel it right there on the stage. It's quite wonderful.
Well, and to kind of put a button on your point, I've seen so many kids, teenagers to college age, largely reject the idea of AI generated content. So going back to the idea of tech people not paying attention, it's like the audience doesn't want it either. You guys just want to sell this tool to people who don't want it and people who don't want to see it.
Right. Much like they told us with digital, you won't light anymore. I've had to light more in digital than sometimes in film because digital sees so well with its heightened capacities and its sensor and all the adjustments you can make right there at camera. It sees into the picture as you're getting it, and it shows you on a big old monitor quite well what you're capturing. So you actually find yourself nuancing the lighting even more, especially if you're trying to help out faces or maintain continuity across a stage that is using a volume wall or using special effects for a background versus reality. That it becomes a whole different skill set that you're obliged to deliver. And I feel like my judgment of exposure and lighting in a digital world is more nuanced and tries to be more specific now. than it used to be, especially the highlight. Not every digital camera delivers a beautiful highlight. You're worried about it. You can reach into the image and go grab more detail in the low end of the negative, quote unquote, than ever before. And that's interesting and useful. But I worry about the highlight a lot, especially on stage lighting.
Yeah. What'd you shoot this show on?
Alexa 35.
Great highlights.
Alexa 35 with Aries signature primes, sometimes a zoom. We rarely strayed away from the primes. I had both positive and negative reaction to some of the things I was seeing, and I really worked on the LUT over the course of the show to kind of bring in a slightly, and I'm glad you said painterly, a slightly more artful painterly vibe within the world of naturalism.
It's hard because like even the bathroom scene looks gorgeous.
Oh, right.
It's like I kept, and it's so it's intentionally, it's comedic, but it's dark, but it looks gorgeous, but these people are ugly. It's a juxtaposition is the word I was looking for. It's a wonderful juxtaposition of things that I find very attractive as a viewer.
Well, it's pretty easy if you're talking about Duncan and Lily's bathroom inside his fancy house. It's pretty easy to see these people have everything, but their reactions to things are those of desperately needy people, like internally needy people. And it was kind of funny to, as you're saying, juxtapose this brutalist architecture and this like, oh, we paid for this incredible house in Silicon Valley, and yet all we do is complain in it. That's hilarious.
Yeah. Well, and something that you had just said that reminded me of something we talked about earlier, which was like filtering for the fire scenes and trying to make it so that post can't mess with it. It's a very sort of classical way of working. I'm going back and reading all these cinematography books that I've had collected over the years, the reflections and
Masters of Light,
Masters of Light. Yeah. All those things. And it is, very interesting to go back and see them basically talking about like, I shoved everything in the toe so they couldn't do anything to my image, just constantly like the lab is not your friend a lot of the time. They're going to try to mess with you.
I neither have that attitude about the lab, which is invaluable in digital, nor do I have that about post. Post is there to help me. I just want to guide them from the very start of it. I want the first image that arrives in dailies and then on the editorial table to have the intentionality of what we visualized right away. Because then hopefully the editor, the director, the post supervisor, and I love post supervisors, they keep me on track about things as they're adjusting and things I'm going to need to do to deliver a product that can survive the visual effects that may have to come in for certain sequences. I try to give them something they fall in love with early on so that when they go to finish the show, it's about maintaining a tracking and a consistency of that original intention, not suddenly changing wholesale the intention. So it is a collaboration. I don't try to marginalize what post can do. Instead, I try to help them have more room to do something they've seen. And if they've seen it, I think they're already on the way to finishing it. That's my general. The lab is kind of in the camera now, but there is a huge role that post plays to then minting that into a finished, mastered piece, a finished version of what we were able to start to do that day on set.
Yeah. Well, the reason I was bringing up the negative versus the digital thing was just the idea of, for instance, shoving everything down in the toe and bleach bypass.
Underexposure.
If you were to do that on digital, it would just be destroyed. It wouldn't look artistic at all. So are you the type of person who is kind of shooting a consistently healthy negative and just making sure the ratios are good? Or are you more playing with the, latitude of the digital sensor?
Well, that's a great question. Often the exposure of the faces or the principal item in frame that your eye is tracking is down around the 20s and the 30s on the IRE scale. But I'm struggling always to make sure that's consistently rendered across the different points of view through a scene. Many people I know work even lower than that in terms of how much visual information is reaching the sensor. I am more of the healthy negative school, where I've designed a LUT that I've made sure matches what I meter. I still use a light meter. I think it's right here, actually, because I was out with my still camera today. I still go on set and use this to try and determine
the spectra. All right.
What's the amount of light hitting the actor's face based on how I've rated the camera, and if I've rated it to be a true 800 ASA, or do I think it's a 640 ASA camera, then I might expose at 1,000, but I know I'm doing that. I know I'm at 2/3 under to the rating of the camera, and then I check the key, and I just try to make sure that relative to the key, everything's falling on the scale, the old idea of the 10 zone system, great scale, that I'm being consistent. If the shadow is down on, like right now, there's a shadow on my right side of your face as I look at you, and I picture that shadow at 2.5 under. I could get a meter across this screen, and maybe I'd be right, or maybe I'd be a little bit wrong. Maybe it's actually 3 under. But then when I cross the line and photograph back towards me, if I'm in the same environment as you, rather than digitally across continents, I would want to have that shadow on my face, which your right side would become my left side on screen. I would want that shadow to have the same amount of underexposure to consistent to the key. What I do with the backgrounds depends on the room. What I do with your key light should probably be consistent, but we can also portray me slightly differently. The thing is, I'm in charge of it. I'm using everything I have, the meter, the waveform, the false color, and then eventually a little chat over the radio with my DIT to hit those metrics consistently. And that's the job. That's what I'm asked to do. It's almost second nature. I almost don't even ask myself whether I'm doing it or not. I just do it, like responding,
Yeah, because that was going to be my next question, is like just hearing you describe it almost sounds like you're having to remember. Because it just happens,
Second nature at this point. I know that that's part of what I'm hired to do. And I enjoy it, so why not? And I enjoy visualizing it and then saying, oh, in the war game, there's going to be much less contrast than there might be in other scenes, in order for Bardolph's war game to seem like, oh, this departure from a reality we've been creating.
Right. Did you find, no, you've shot big open. I was going to say, did you find that scene particularly difficult? But you've shot big scenes before.
We planned it well, and I had a good director for the planning, Alex Bueno, who has done big things himself, and we had a good special effects team, and we had a good art department, and they dug a real trench, and they put in all the stuff. I had to avoid trying to shoot when the sun was coming out. We had some cloud issues. I really tried to hold off the moment of photography until the cloud came in. Otherwise, things could get too contrasty. Like I was saying, I wanted a lower contrast on Private Tom Ruffage in his outfit. It meant something to me. It was leading into a bigger story point that I'm not going to spoil for an audience, but Tom Ruffage has a massive arc in episode 8, and we needed to give him that leverage up from the very first scene.
Yeah. It's nope, lost that talk completely.
Well, just Ruffage's military history and what he represents to Silicon Valley, he starts to represent a buying opportunity for private data, whereas that should not be what we do with this technology. We should help veterans and help veterans at risk, and allow people like Tom Ruffage to create, and I do believe the character is a creative, an opportunity to see an ability to help people through this data. They see something different, and that's a core conflict, and it ends in a tragic way. I'm not going to go beyond that, but how we handled the Bardolph-generated war games was super important to me at that moment in the script. It really set up what's going to play out at the Watch Code event, and then eventually Tom Ruffage as a main through line to the characters in that movie. I said, which is nice in that episode.
Feels like a movie. I mean, you touched on it earlier, but as you're making the show, a couple weeks later, there's new, this is a very hot, or not hot, but
yes. It's
current
a hotly
topic.
contemporary. It's a hotly contemporary topic with sometimes astonishing things happening outside the bubble of a show. And you're reading them and you're like, wow, we have got to get this show out because it's becoming modern news and it needs to be acknowledged. The whole Sam Altman arc going through the contemporaneous production of our show had an enormous effect on it. And I do read a lot of news and I do get into a lot of tech news. And then I'm also a person just watching the marketplace for these companies and how they're promising so much to the world. Will they deliver it, or will it be the next bubble in our stock and expectation market of what tech can do? It's happened before. It's likely to happen again. So yeah, we were constantly like thumb to the pulse of what the tech industry was delivering and what that meant to us, what that meant to our show, and also our ability as creatives to deliver something that hopefully helps people contextualize this.
Yeah, in a way, it's kind of got a bit of a Big Short as it's happening kind of immediacy to it.
And that was an influence, the way they shot The Big Short, the way they were handheld moving through scenes in The Big Short, and also commenting on that form of market-driven, tech-driven money total mishandling. Totally great. I loved that book, actually. I have it at a home at hand, so I can always read it if I want to. I love that writer.
Yeah. Well, the hour has gone by, and I want to be respectful of your time because I can see it's nighttime out there. But I would love to have you back on.
No, it's fine. We can keep talking. I realize. Thank you. We can keep talking. I realize that a lot of maybe drifts off of the subject of the show in a way that I don't want you to be saddled with for the edit. If you have some more questions to have answered, let's do it.
Oh no, it's actually perfect because the trick of this show has always been it's more about the person than the show. Like what interests them, what inspires them, that kind of stuff. And then we use the show as the sort of bed for that discussion. So I'm good.
Okay. If you've gotten what you needed from hearing my on how we generated images for this show and also the practicalities of it, then I'm glad. I think everybody shows these days has an obligation to the audience to think about what is quality at this point in time. I really am very lucky. I've worked on some quality productions. I try to bring that aspect, history, to each new show and say, what can I do differently? Not what can I do the same. I'm not going to bring lighting from The Americans set in 1980 to lighting for the Audacity set right now, like right this week. I want very much for what I bring to a show to have the capacity to look historically at things and the ability technically to make it exciting and fun to watch. So I had a good one up. Very grateful. It will not look like sugar. It will look like the Audacity, and I'll be happy for that outcome.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for people. I guess it just came out a couple of days ago, so I'm excited for people to start seeing it. And I think that'll be one that people will start texting each other about, like, hey, have you seen this show?
Me too, and especially the performances. Billy Magnuson and Sarah lead a cast that's huge, but really each person gets their part to play in this. Lucy Punch, Zach Galifianakis, Rob Corddry, Elliot, who plays Orson, huge, and his fellow teens in the show, also huge. So everybody has a role to play. That's why it's a well-written show. I believe it's a well-filmed show, and I hope other people, when they see it, start agreeing. Because as you pointed out, there is a painterly aspect to it.
Yeah, and it's I think I think there's been a lot of discussion about how modern television can look kind of samey and not cinematic in such a way. But I think this one certainly carries that. I prefer a painterly look to a, without it being, when we say painterly, we're not talking about like soft or like in a kind of glowy sense. It's very, it's pastel almost in a way that's very pleasing, but not low contrast.
Yeah.
It's not log.
It doesn't have to be varnished. Doesn't have to lose contrast, be varnished over, be aged in wood. It's something different. And I'm glad you perceive that. I'm always trying to come up with a different look for work. So hopefully people respond well to this. I'll tell you, the thing that excites me is always the next season. We're lucky to have a second season already in the planning, already starting. I'm always excited about what the next step is, not necessarily beholden to the last.
Yeah. And especially with how things are going now, like you were saying with like the wars and stuff, that second season is probably going to be something else.
Oh, I can't wait. I totally can't wait.
Yeah. Well, when you get done with that, let's have you back and we can get into a big. We'll stay more on the show that time. I won't pull you off track.
It's fine, Kenny. I'm happy to do it. All right. Thank you so much.
Frame and Reference is an Albot production, produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to frameandrefpod.com and clicking on the Patreon button. It's always appreciated. And as always, thanks for listening.